Hello and welcome back to the NastyMetalProductions channel here at YouTube, and welcome to another Album of the Week video. This is episode number 203. Today's episode I will be putting a spotlight on Thunder and Lightning, the classic 12th and final album from the legendary Thin Lizzy. So, with all that said, let's begin. By the beginning of 1982, things were marred by both Downey and Gorham having to take breaks from the European tour to recover from personal problems. Downey was involved in a fight in a nightclub in Denmark on the month of February, and Gorham was suffering from drug-induced exhaustion. Downey missed 5 concert shows and was replaced by Mark Nazif, if I pronounced that correctly, for 3 of those shows, and by Mike Mesber of the support band The Lookalikes for the other 2. In March, Gorham collapsed and returned home. 8 concerts were performed as a quartet and 6 others were postponed. Later in the year, Lynott went on a solo tour. Is that the best way you? I've always had I always would pronounce Phil Lynott as Lynott, but I think it's Lynott. Maybe, I don't know. I've never really completely paid too much attention to the way it's supposed to be pronounced, or I just always forgot. So, if I was saying it incorrectly, I apologize. Okay, I apologize. So don't try and shoot me for it. Still, alright, to continue on, Lynott went on a solo tour and released his second solo album, the Philip Lynott Album, which did not sell particularly well. Snowy White left the band in August of 1982, who was tired of the disorganized schedules and Lynott's drug problems, which were the same, I think, that Gary Moore kind of had as well, if I am not mistaken. Although, by his own admission, he was too restrained and just quiet to fill in well with his more ruckus bandmates. White went on to achieve top 10 chart success in the UK with his single Bird of Paradise in 1983. Longtime co-manager Chris O'Donnell also left at this time, later saying a once brilliant band was turning to crap before my very eyes. Lynott wanted to find a replacement for White before starting to record the next album, which would turn out to be the band's last. By September of 1982, after some unsuccessful rehearsals with Dutch guitarist Adrian Vandenberg, he has settled on then former Tigers of Pantane guitarist John Sykes. Sykes would soon co-write the first single from the album, Cold Sweat, although the rest of the album has already been written. So by either the end of September or as early as October, with this new version of Thin Lizzy, they would head to a few studios with the late producer Chris Sangarides. One of the studios would be Lombard Studios in Dublin, Ireland, the Power Plant in London, and then the Boathouse Studios in London, UK. And by March 4th of 1983, Thunder and Lightning would be unleashed to the public, featuring 9 tracks of what would be some of Thin Lizzy's most riveting stuff, clocking at the length of 40 minutes and 36 seconds. So, these 9 tracks are, well, beginning off with the aforementioned title track, This Is the One, The Sun Goes Down, The Holy War, Cold Sweat, Someday She's Going to Hit Back, Baby Please Don't Go, which is not a cover track, folks, Bad Habits, and then finally ending with Heart Attack. So there it is. There is your 9 tracks. With this album being Thin Lizzy's final work, gaining John Sykes was what Phil needed to fulfill his last vision for Thin Lizzy. Taking inspiration from the burgeoning British heavy metal movement, Thin Lizzy went out with a bang. From the scorching hot title track, the heavy tundra of Cold Sweat, and the sharp-edge hard rocker that is Heart Attack. Having John Sykes pours, he just pours every bit of his life into these songs. With both Phil and Brian Downey giving everything they got, this album proved that Thin Lizzy were not going to phone it in. But there are still plenty of that Lynott charm, like the catchy fun vibe of This Is the One, the calm slow blues vibe of The Sun Goes Down, which is the kind of song you want to play on a nice cool night to wind yourself down. Then there is the majestic The Holy War, which has plenty of those twin guitar harmonies and Phil Lynott's passionate lyrics. Then of course Baby Please Don't Go, again like I stated, it is not a cover, and Bad Habits are also fun, catchy, feel-good rockers. I legit love this album. To me, there really isn't a bad song to be found here. Each song has its own magic charm to it. To me, this is one of my favorite Lizzy albums alongside Fighting and Bad Reputation. And I also kind of fit in maybe Johnny the Fox somewhere in there. This album would be much more successful than its predecessors, reaching number 4 in the UK charts. The tour to support the album was to be their farewell tour. Although Lynott was not convinced that this would be the end of the band, Sykes wanted to continue, although Gorham had enough. The tour was successful, and some concerts were recorded to compile a live album. Partway into the tour, many of Thin Lizzy's past guitarists were invited on stage to contribute to some of the songs they had originally recorded. I think even during some of these shows, if I'm not mistaken, Lemmy of Motorhead, since he was good friends with Lemmy, I think would also kind of, I think if I am correct, I think did kind of get on stage for at least a couple of songs, maybe one song, I think, to just jam out with Thin Lizzy. I'm not quite sure, but I know that Phil Lynott did for Lemmy. I think it was became the Birthday album, which was also recorded for a live videotape as well, besides just being a live album. And it was for, I think, the version of Motorhead where Phil Lynott would just get on stage with Lemmy, and there's footage of it, and it's really fun footage to see. But the thing is that you kind of have to take notice is that I don't think Phil was actually ever plugged in. He just got his bass on and just kind of, in a way, he just mimicked whatever. He just kind of played along when he really probably wasn't really plugged in at all. So it was just kind of almost to an extent air guitaring a bit to the song. But again, he had an actual bass in his hand. But it's kind of funny. Again, he just has but a real nice big smile on his face while doing so. It's great. The only exception being Snowy White, again, who didn't partake in any of this. The album was released on October 16th of 1983 as Life Live, which included an older performance of Renegade featuring Snowy White, so that was probably their only way of kind of substituting for the absence of Snowy White, who I think on his own part did not want to take part in those final shows, whatever, with Thin Lizzy. The live album, of course, reached number 29 in the UK charts. The tour continued while 2 more singles were released. The last of them, The Sun Goes Down, only reached number 52 in August. Lynott also undertook another solo tour accompanied by Downey and Sykes under the name The Three Musketeers. After a difficult leg of the tour in Japan, where some members of the band had difficulty obtaining heroin, that kind of bit makes another play into this, what would become a very sad, tragic story. Thin Lizzy played their final UK concert before their breakup at the Reading Festival on August 28th of 1983, which was eventually released in 1992 as their BBC Radio 1 Live in Concert album. The last concert named in Nuremberg on September 4th, which was a part of the German, I think, leg, whatever, of the Monsters of Rock Festival. It was like a little sub, whatever, they had that, and if I'm not mistaken, Motorhead was on that bill, Saxon, and Whitesnake, I think, too, was on that bill, which I think kind of says for where John Sykes would eventually go, okay? I have to kind of find my way to fit in that little story there. After which, the band members went their separate ways. Phil Lynott would continue to make music, like forming the Grand Slam Project, and even contribute to writing Military Man on his friend Gary Moore's 1985 album, Out in the Fields. In the same year of 1985, Phil Lynott was planning on recording a third solo album, and even spoke to Brian Downey on possibly reforming Thin Lizzy. And apparently this was supposed to take, again, this reunion of Thin Lizzy was supposed to take place, I think, in was it March or somewhere? I think it was in March, I think, of 1986. Well, however, due to Phil Lynott's heavy addiction to heroin, Phil Lynott was at his mother's house on Christmas night. He collapsed and was taken to the hospital. And on January 4th of 1986, I hope I got that story correct from, what was it, is it Behind the Music, whatever, that MTV, or was it MTV or VH1 that used to air, and it was on Thin Lizzy, and the thing is, his mother was one that was actually recalling the events of basically the last final days of Phil Lynott. And the thing is that kind of got me, was that I think it was at the hospital, or was it at his bed side or whatever, the covers were kind of slightly off of his feet, and she literally took one look at him, and she knew exactly that he obviously had succumbed his addiction to heroin, and he passed. And again, it was because of his heavy addiction to heroin. It caused internal abscesses, pneumonia, and hopefully I'm going to pronounce this correctly, but septicemia, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And it's just real sad. On May 17th of 1986, Gary Moore would reform Thin Lizzy to pay tribute to their fallen friend by playing a self-aid benefit concert. Thin Lizzy would reform many times, but only to pay tribute to the late Phil Lynott. So there it is. This album has already reached its 40th anniversary, so for those who had cut their teeth on this classic, you can leave your thoughts, whether they be positive or negative, you can leave them in the comment section below. But if you haven't, what are you doing? Go and listen to it. This is a very good album, and I think for any of those who wants to hear just at one point how strong and powerful Thin Lizzy were, and how they went out with, go and listen to it. It is worth every bit of your time. So that is that. This is Harry Thrasher saying I'm out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.